What's up, everybody? Chris here, and I am not by myself today. I'm doing a review with a friend. And Kim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Kim.
Kim, do you want to say how do we know each other, Kim?
Well, we used to be coworkers. I mean,
Are we
technically we
not
still are.
still
We
kind of?
still are. Yeah. You still hang around every now and then. So that was the beginning, and this is the middle, and yeah.
Who knows what the end will look like,
I
right?
know. I know.
No, we both teach English. I've talked about this on my channel before, so we have a lot
Gotcha.
of fun doing that. But Kim and I both have a shared adoration for horror movies, and
Mhm.
Kim recently made me aware of a movie that we both wanted to check out called Christmas Bloody Christmas. What do you think about the title? I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday when we were hanging out, but do you like the title, not like the title?
I don't mind it because I feel like it perfectly sums up the movie. It is Christmas and it's bloody and it's still Christmas. So I feel like it serves its purpose. I just like, I know we talked about, is it paying homage to a song, or is it feels like there's purpose in the repetition, but I don't know what it's
Yeah,
referring to, if it
I
is.
don't either. I mean, I don't know what a better title would be other than like Killer Robot Santa Christmas, but like
Or just
I
like
don't know.
Bloody Christmas. And I meant to look up, is there a movie called Bloody Christmas? And is that
Well,
why they had to add the extra Christmas?
and it's weird because I feel like we're kind of in this glut of like scary Christmas movies. So there was
Yeah.
Violent Night, right, which just came out, which I haven't seen yet. I want
Yeah,
to
I've
see
never
that.
seen.
I think that's probably a more digestible for the masses type of movie than
Probably.
this. So anyway, yeah, I actually really enjoy this, and we'll kind of get into what we like and don't like. And what I actually did was sort of tried to summarize the plot, so I thought we could just kind of talk through that a little bit and see
Sure.
what stands out. But I just want to talk about what I liked about it at first. I mean, there were some things that I didn't think were great, but
Yeah.
overall, I thought this was a good movie for the most part. I mean, just given that it's relatively low budget, and I actually tried to look up what the budget was, but I couldn't find that. Did you see that on IMDb
I
anywhere?
don't know that I saw a budget, but I saw a gross figure that wasn't a lot, but I don't know what their budget was to begin with.
And weirdly, we both kind of figured out this is playing at one theater in the Charlotte area where we live. So I was kind of surprised by that. Like I thought this was only a Shudder thing.
Yeah. And it's a theater that's not like a independent, or I mean, it's a pretty known theater here. So that was shocking also, but
Do you now? So we both watched this at home. Do you wish you would have seen it on a big screen, or do you not think it
I
doesn't really
do,
matter?
only because the screen I watched it on was pretty small. And I felt like a lot of the movie was kind of dark and hard to see. And
Yeah.
so it might have been better in a theater. And I did look up tickets at that theater. And when I looked, there were no seats purchased. So
You would have been by yourself in the theater watching
which
Christmas
would
Bloody
have been
Christmas.
great. But I'm curious, like, did anybody go see this movie?
Yeah, I
I
would.
don't know if they would release that information to us, but I'd be curious to know.
Yeah. So okay, just right off the bat, I think it's a nice looking movie. I kind of like the neon
Yeah.
aesthetic that it has. Like it looks like a bunch of Christmas candy exploded on the screen or
Yes.
something. Like
Yes.
I like
It
that.
definitely worked with their whole like retro record shop. Like it has an 80s vibe, even though it is not an 80s movie. And I
No.
did like that.
Yeah, and it to me it almost feels like a grindhouse homage type of thing. Like
Yeah.
especially in the first like minute where they have these really cheesy commercials that kind of start things off of the
Yes.
movie.
It also definitely Grindhouse, and I had a lot of like Rob Zombie feel,
Dude, that is
especially
exactly
with the
that's
deaths.
awesome. So I didn't make that note, but I was thinking the exact same thing while I was watching it. It felt very
Yes.
like I don't want to say the word trashy because I don't know if that's like the right word, but
Gritty.
gritty. Maybe that's the word I'm thinking of. I don't know. Yeah, that's a
We'll
good
use
better
that.
word. Well, yeah, we'll
Yes.
go with that. So the thing that I like too is that I don't think there was any CG in this at all, which was a good decision. I mean, it seems like it's all practical
Interesting.
effects, and I'm a big fan of practical effects because I think if they had gone the CG route, given the budget, it would have not been great, probably,
No.
especially with the robot. And we'll
Yeah.
get into how awesome the robot is, which that was my favorite part of this, I think, especially at the end more than anything else. I don't know how you felt about the ending, but we'll get into some detail with
Yeah.
that. I thought for the most part the dialogue was pretty good.
Yeah.
We talked about this yesterday. So our kids got together yesterday and made Christmas cookies because that's what parents and kids do.
And
It
their
was
Christmas
awesome.
cookies were quite terrifying, so it was
Yeah,
very fitting.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, my son made a ninja star covered in blood, and there were some other things which were funny as part of that. But anyway, the dialogue. So it starts out, in the record shop where this character Tori, I think is her name, is
Mhm.
working. So I thought right off the bat that they were really trying hard, maybe to the point of overworking to make the character sound quote unquote cool. But I guess it was like realistic dialogue. Like I don't know. Like, what
Yeah.
was sort of your take about that?
I really liked it as a writer. Like I appreciated how natural it felt, and I was really curious. And I don't know if I'll ever have the answer to this. How much of that was like word for word scripted, and how much of it was improv? Because I could see it going either way because it did feel so natural, but it also all felt very intentional. And so I was invested like right away in
And,
these
and
characters.
I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but do you want to talk about your writer background, because you've got some horror screenplay chops, right, Kim? I mean, that's
A
something you do.
little. I mean, my screenplay, The Dead Parade, has won Best Horror Script in a few festivals, sort of nationally and internationally. And so I'm just very aware and also super critical of writing, especially when it comes to characters. And because I do write horror, and I have to come up with characters and ways to kill them. And so I felt like this movie really did a good job of introducing just enough people to kill without me being like, that person was unnecessary, or I didn't care, or that took up time. I thought it was very economic in its murder, and I
That's
appreciated that.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, you're a great writer, but I think, both of us are a little bit critical of that because we're English teachers, right? So I mean, we're going to be a little more like cognizant of when things don't seem to mesh well or don't go well from
Yeah.
like a story development point of view. So anyway, okay, so that's what I liked about it. What was there anything that you would add to that? I mean, just generally before we get into the plot, like anything that you liked that I didn't touch on,
Not
you
real.
know?
I mean, it was the dialogue and the characters, because there were definitely things I did not like, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But
Right.
I really did like. It's not a love story by any means, but there is this undertone of like, are these characters going to get together? And I thought the build really worked, and so I was invested, and like in the back of my mind I'm like, I don't want these people to die. And I think if you've done that as a horror writer, like check, you've done your job, you've created a story people are invested in.
And I guess I should say before we jump into the plot, there are going to be spoilers here, right? So if you haven't seen the movie, then maybe go watch it and then come back, because I think we're going to get into a good bit of detail with who dies, who doesn't die, all of that kind of stuff, at least a little bit. So
A little bit.
okay, the movie starts out in a record store and it's somewhere in California. And the only reason I know that is because at one point you see a license plate on a car, but also
Okay.
going on to IMDb, you can see they filmed it in a town called Placerville, I guess, which is near Sacramento somewhere.
Okay, I knew it was California. Yeah.
Yeah. So it starts out and they're kind of working late on Christmas Eve, and it's a character named Tori and then Robbie, I think, right? And
Mhm.
so they're just talking about Christmas Eve plans, and she has a date set up with some guy on Tinder or something.
Yeah.
So, I felt like, just to talk about missed opportunities, I thought this guy was going to randomly show up at some point, and it was going to be like a hilarious death scene. That like he's like, "Hey, I thought we were going to meet." He shows up at the
Yeah.
apartment and is there right as Killer Robot Santa is there. So, what did you think about the whole Tinder kind of subplot? I mean, I guess it was just fuel to get them where they needed to be. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like that was its only reason. And I guess to add some exposition into who these characters sort of are. But I didn't think about it, but now I agree that that could have been a really cool opportunity to, because I mean, that's always my rule in anything I ever write and anything I ever tell anyone. If you bring up somebody, a name, we are going to give it attention. So it better matter. And I don't know that it mattered as much as it could have.
Yeah, and I mean, at one point they were kind of, ragging on the guy about, like, I guess he plays guitar or something, and I was
There
expecting
were
him
a
to
lot
be.
of comments, I think, on like, I mean, would we call him a hipster? I don't know. But I think the movie in general, and especially the characters, were super critical of like different stereotypes we put people into when it comes to like their music tastes and their style. And he definitely was not a cool kid.
No, no, and I think he was a little bit older than the characters, and so that was part of it. Like he had children, and they were kind of
Yes.
younger or something like that. But I
Yeah.
totally expected him to be like, serenading her on her balcony with a guitar, and then Killer Robot Santa shows up and like beheads him or something like that. But that didn't happen, and that's cool. I mean, I just thought that was kind of a missed thing. So then they walk down the street. So they close up the record shop. They're going down the street to a toy store that's just like a couple of buildings down, right? And they meet up with some other friends there. And they're just kind of shooting the breeze and talking about Christmas Eve plans, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I do think it's just adding more of this backstory, but in a way, again, that like, I'm interested. I see these relationships. It all felt very natural. And I feel like what this movie did really well was they never did a telling or an explaining. Like everything was shown, like even about the robot, the context of why there's a Santa robot and why we should be concerned, like showing the news clips on the TV and the commercials. Like, I do think that's the one thing this movie did very well. Everything was shown and nothing was just told to us. And I picked up on everything I needed to know.
Show, don't tell. We talk about this as writing teachers.
Yes.
And so since you talked about this, the robot itself, if I remember correctly, it was like a Department of Defense, I don't know, android or something that they retired and then sent to department stores, and it was reverting to its firmware, which was to kill anything and everything in sight.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. I hope we do, because I have a lot of comments on that. But that's basically the backstory is that it was defense software that I guess they retired, but they show these little clips about like there's a recall on some of these Santas. And they're like, but it's just harmless pranks, no worries, except now we see one in the toy store. And so it's like, is this one that's not going to be so harmless?
Well, and I love the way it's introduced, because they walk in the toy store and it's clearly just an actor standing there, right? But he's just standing there and they walk by and he sort of does this kind of awkward side look thing, which was funny. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, to me, this was a pretty comedic movie. I mean, I assume that was intentional, just given the premise, right? I mean, you just think it's going to be funny. I mean, I wouldn't say it was scary ever in any way, shape, or form for the most part.
Not scary, gruesome.
Yeah, gruesome. And that's what you want from this, right? I mean, you want gore, and you get a good bit of that. And again, the practical effects of the gore, I thought, were really pretty good overall. But anyway, so they're in the toy store, they're talking with the friends, and this whole time they've been drinking, right? So they keep drinking, they're just getting
so much.
drunker.
Like, also, I do feel like there needed to be a disclaimer, like if you struggle with alcoholism, here is a number to call, because I'm very concerned about all of their livers.
Yeah. And I mean, so after they're there, they're chatting, they're like, okay, friends, and I forget the friends' names, but they're like, we're going to see you later. And after that, they go to a bar. So they started drinking at the record store. They're drinking more.
And liquor, not just beer, like whiskey.
Right. And so they end up at a bar. And before I jump to that, is there anything else in the toy store that I'm forgetting about that, I mean, I know some stuff that happens not soon thereafter, but
But I do feel like they've established like there's relationships here. Like these are people that care about each other. And so again, I think we're like, okay, I want you all to live. Like, I know you now. Right. I know we relate. I hope for the best.
I think we're setting up the fodder essentially at this point.
Yeah.
So they're at the bar and they meet the local sheriff. I think it was Sheriff Monroe. Maybe was his name. That sounds familiar. I've got the IMDb pulled up. I can double check myself. But anyway, they're sitting there talking, and the sheriff just seems to generally have kind of a disdain for Sheriff Monroe. Yeah, that's it. A disdain for, I guess, Robbie. He doesn't seem to be as upset with Tori, but he just seems to not like the kid. I can't remember exactly if there was any kind of backstory there that they went into.
There is a backstory that they bring up about, like, I think Robbie, like, drunkenly urinating once, and, like, the sheriff's grandson was there. So it's like, so it's not that he's a bad, like, we still like him. He's not a bad guy. There's not this sordid past, which I appreciate, because this did not need any sort of, like, Hallmark drama. Like, don't add that in.
Right. And I agree with what you were saying earlier about they do a good job of building up the chemistry between the two leads, I think, for the most part. And that's really kind of what all of this window dressing is, I think, building toward when they get together eventually. Spoiler alert, even though, that we're going to talk about it. But anyway, so we cut back to the toy store. I think at that point, the two friends are engaged in relations, I guess you would say. Right. Yes, but this is when the robot Santa comes to life at this point, right?
Yes, it does.
So yeah, go ahead. I can tell you got something you want to chime in with here.
Because my biggest gripe with this movie is like, okay, they're being recalled. I get it. But what triggers. Like, I wanted a trigger. And I know maybe that seems like you wanted more motivation in your killer robot, but I did. I wanted to know, like, if it's a defense software, what was the trigger that set it off? Like, was there, and I think they could have done that. They could have had somebody do something somewhat violent that would have, like, oh, violence is happening, I must respond with violence. And I don't know. I just wanted a little bit more of that.
That's totally, yeah. I mean, like, that's a good point. I mean, they could have had somebody getting mugged in front of the store or something, and it sees
anything. I mean, or even in the relations they were having, if there was concern over like violence or something. But like, it was just suddenly, I have been activated to kill, and it's like,
well, and it seems like it's implied that there are tons of these Santas out in the world in different places because there's a recall, which implies there's a lot of them, right? So you would think that the Army or the Department of Defense or whoever would realize, like, oh, you know, these are murdering people across the country. We should send like a team to make sure that nothing has gone wrong in small town California at the store, instead of just saying box it up and send it back.
They've labeled it as harmless pranks, like nothing really bad has happened yet. I can see why maybe that hasn't happened. They just you know, but nothing's gone this far. But that's also why I think I needed more of a reason why suddenly this particular Santa grabs an axe and gets shot happy. Yes, he had an axe to grab. But why? What triggered it?
I don't. That's a So. And I don't know if they thought about that as they were writing the movie or not, and just wanted to keep it as paper thin as possible. But I agree, like, we don't need a ton of explanation, but just a little bit more would have been good.
Yes,
right.
Literally 10 seconds more.
The robot picks up the axe, kills both of the people in the store, and I think one of them he literally splits down the middle.
And that's where I first started to take issue, because I know that the style is very gritty and has sort of that 80s feel, but that was when the deaths to me, like, really? Like, you're going to split someone in half?
At least give me like a fountain of blood if you're going to do that.
Yeah. Right? So I do feel like it was probably a style choice, because all of the deaths felt a little bit too much.
Yes. So I agree. And you were saying, God, I got totally off my train of thought here. You were saying that there should have been more gore, or at least.
Well, no, see, I thought it was an appropriate amount of gore. Just to me, the gore, and I know it feels ridiculous to say, but felt ridiculous. Like, I wished that it had been more realistic in the gore. Like, you can chop people up, I have no problem with that, but make it a little bit more realistic, instead of like, now I feel like you've crossed a line. Everything felt so natural. I even bought the killer robot, and now I'm like, now to me this feels too sort of, I don't know.
Well, like there's a gory moment not too far down the road, and we'll get to this as far as the plot point goes, but he basically head stomps a guy at some point. So it totally reminded me of Halloween 2018 when Michael Myers like head stomps the doctor, except that looked obviously a little more real. I mean, that head stomp looked like a dummy being crushed, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, talking about dummies, when later on there's a scene where there's a body being literally tossed around, and I'm like, it's so clearly a dummy. And that's where I'm like, I know you didn't have a big budget, and that's fine, but there were these little moments that took me out of it so much, and I'm like, you had me.
Yeah, and I will say, I tend to be, I'm a little more forgiving with that kind of thing, just because, I don't know if you know this, Kim, but my friends and I at one point made a Bigfoot horror movie called You Worry. Have I ever told you about this?
I really don't know now.
This might be a place where I put a clip of it in here. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, at one point, there's a dummy in that. And so I totally get the struggle of trying to make something look real when you have no money to work with at all to get it. But yeah, I mean, everything else, even the acting, like, I thought the acting was pretty good, right? And so when you see something that jarring that doesn't really fit in the overall framework, it does kind of take you out of it. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so anyway, both of those friends are dead. The robot leaves the store. He just misses Robbie and Tori as they're walking down the sidewalk, right? And they're setting up something here because, you know, clearly they're drunk at this point. They should not be driving. But what do? They get in their Grand Wagoneer. They're getting Robbie's
another disclaimer. If you have had alcohol, do not get behind the wheel of a car.
Yeah. And even the bartender says something like, "Are you guys okay to drive?" And they just sort of brush it off. And
they're like, no, but we're going to go now.
We're going to do it anyway, which is terrible. Anyway, so the car has all kinds of struggles, right? They get in it, it's a huge mess,
Of
and they're
course,
setting
which
up
is a
something
good setup for later.
right, because it takes it a little while to get cranked and to get going, but they do leave, but not far behind them is the robot. And so this is a question I had. So they drive away. I mean, they're clearly going away from the robot. I don't know if they're going a mile down the road, 10 miles down the road. I don't know, but it miraculously ends up at that same apartment complex somehow. So,
and I did assume small town. They probably just lived like a couple blocks down. Like that was the assumption that I had. It had that small town feel. So I was okay with that.
yes.
I guess.
Yeah. So, part of me was like, does it have some kind of advanced tracking software because it was an army robot or something? I don't know, but that's me way overthinking a movie like this, probably.
Yeah.
So they get back, and what do they do when they get back? They start drinking some more.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, and they're also not just drinking. They're also getting high.
Like right. That's right. Because I think that they make some brownies or something. I can't remember exactly what had happened there. Or she put something in the oven that burns. That's a little bit later.
Yeah.
Down the road. But anyway, and her sister and her brother-in-law are also there.
Yes. I thought that was a nice little placement. Like there's somebody else here. They're knocked out. Now, realistically, I'm like, if you're blasting a record, I don't know how these people are sleeping through it, but they set it up. They at least covered it, and they've established there's other people in this townhouse, which we're going to find out later.
Right. So this is the point where their chemistry finally, happens, and they get together, and so there's sort of this drawn out scene. But the way they parallel it, I thought was kind of interesting. So the robot has shown up to the apartment across the way. I guess it is just the way they sort of filmed it. And just goes into a random apartment, and there's a family there, just sort of on Christmas Eve hanging out. And so, what does the robot do, Kim, when it walks into the apartment?
Starts killing people.
Right, because that's what killer Santa robots do.
Without any reason why, But I will say, I appreciate that this film was very ruthless. Like no one is safe.
Yeah, actually, I know what you're getting toward, and that I was kind of shocked by that a little bit. Okay, so. First, he kills the dad. Is it the dad first?
Yeah.
That's the head stomp on the staircase that looked a little questionable, but still, it was gruesome enough. It worked. And I'm trying to remember, was there a mom character also there? I can't remember.
She ran into the bathroom.
Oh,
and
that's right.
When I'm like, I think you have a child that you need to be thinking about, but apparently you're not.
This was like George Costanza in Seinfeld when the fire happens. He just knocks everybody out of the way and tries to get away as quickly as he can because his safety is the first.
She does not make it.
Yeah. So she doesn't make it. Then there's a kid. So the kid is downstairs by the Christmas tree, and Killer Santa is on sort of the upstairs, I guess, balcony walkway inside the house, just looking down, staring creepily at the kid. The whole time I kept thinking, like, they're not going to kill a kid. Like, I'm like,
they're not going to do that.
That's not going to happen. I mean, again, I don't want to kick it back to Halloween 2018, but there's a scene where Michael Myers walks by a baby.
Yes.
Right, and does not kill the baby and walks away. So I'm thinking if Michael Myers is not going to kill a baby, I just can't imagine Killer Robot Santa doing that. But Killer Robot Santa does that. And so they sort of intersplice the moment he brings the axe down with Tori looking out her kitchen window at the apartment and sees it happen. And that's when everything hits the fan and she totally freaks out, as one would. Right?
Yes.
And so, but at the same time, Santa sees her looking, right? So then he decides, okay, I'm going across the way. And I'm not sure if he recognizes her from earlier or just decides, okay.
Does it even matter? I don't know.
It does not matter. It doesn't matter, right? So there's sort of this chaotic moment in her apartment where she's trying to get everybody up and going, right? So Robbie,
which they say later, like, yes, I know I was drunk, but I'm sober now, and I've never been that drunk and then had to sober up because I've been hit by a killer robot. So I don't know if that can happen, but that felt like, wow. And also, when did they get their shoes on? That was when I was like, I'm out.
Right. I mean,
because I'm like, you didn't have shoes on 5 minutes ago.
You said this. I mean, they would be. I'm just guesstimating here, but I would think they would be on the verge of alcohol poisoning, like drunk at this point, right? Like unable to move sort of thing. But anyway, everybody sobers up in an instant. And so Robbie comes downstairs. What's going on? They wake up the sister and the brother-in-law. And I thought the brother-in-law was hilarious. Like, I wish he had been in the movie a little bit more because he's just sort of aloof the whole time. Like the whole sequence. He's like, "Want to get the car keys? I'll get the car keys." Like he does. But
it makes perfect sense with like how they talked crap about him earlier. Like she clearly doesn't like her brother-in-law, and I can totally see why now. Like, yes, that tracks.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought for a minute, I thought, okay, maybe somehow this guy's going to live because he's kind of comedic relief a little bit at that point. But anyway, the robot shows up. Well, first of all, they think the robot has walked past their apartment. They all get really quiet. It's sort of stomping
Yeah,
around as a robot
yeah.
does. But then it comes to the window, and I'm trying to remember who it takes out first. Is it the brother-in-law? Maybe.
It's either him or the sister because she bites it real quick. And that's where I'm like, this film was ruthless. Like, you were not gonna make it. And I think that this was a really smart way to introduce characters to kill and add that suspense. We knew enough about them. We knew who they were. We'd had conversations about them. Then we meet them. I didn't need to know anything else about them, and I was good with them dying. But it added it, and it was a really nice way to add people and kill them without taking too much away from the script itself. So I appreciated that.
Yes. And again, it was that sequence. I don't remember being super duper bloody or gory, particularly.
No, it was very fast.
Yeah, and ultimately, what it results in is Robbie and Tori making it out of the apartment and getting into his crappy Wagoneer and not being able to start it because that's a horror movie trope. You can't start the car when you need to start it, kind of thing, and it works. He does get it started, but Santa is already down the stairs staring at them. They freak out, and he drives right into a tree. Which I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. What's your take on that? I mean, again,
for me, and as someone who is guilty of doing that in their own writing, like I can recognize it. Like I've created a conflict and I've added suspense. Great, we had that moment, but I still can't let them get away. So I have to add something else in. Let's just add a tree. That's easy. They just hit a tree.
Some kind of obstacle, right? And it works. And so Santa pulls out the windshield, bashes it out. And I was a little bit not expecting this. Robbie takes a axe to the face at that point, I think.
That's when I was like, wow, okay, game on. Because and I liked him. I literally was like sitting in my chair watching this going, no, Robbie. I liked him. I liked that they got together. And I was like, but good on you, Christmas, Bloody Christmas. Thank you.
I was watching this on my laptop downstairs in our house in a recliner. I had some headphones on, and my wife was in the other room doing work, and I just started laughing hysterically because I didn't expect it to happen. Like it was just one of those kind of shock sort of things. So yeah, I actually like that. I like when movies take out characters you don't expect because it makes the whole thing a lot less certain, right? A lot more shaky.
I mean that's the whole point of Psycho and Alfred Hitchcock. It's like let's kill the main character because now our audience has no idea. Like nobody's safe. Anything could happen.
Yeah. It's sort of the Game of Thrones effect, kind of. Even though, like you said, Psycho did it way before that. So yes. So anyway,
and then Wes Craven did it in Scream with Drew Barrymore. So sorry, Game of Thrones, you're not original.
So not to get off track. Scream 6, the trailer. Kim is a mega Scream fan, and so I saw the original when it came out and the second one, but then I borrowed your DVDs for like the third or fourth one to catch up on those. So I think when the sixth one comes out, even though I know you may not be super excited about that, we should watch it and do another review because
we will. We will.
Why not? Right? Yeah, maybe it'll be amazing. Maybe it'll totally live up to what you're hoping is going to happen.
I have no hope.
No hope at this point at all. It's all drained. It's gone.
Gone after that fifth Scream movie. I just can't.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so anyway, all right. Robbie's dead. Tori is still in the car. This is when the police show up, I believe. Right?
Yes.
Or at least one.
Oh, don't forget the neighbor. The car.
That's right. Oh, crap. Do you want to describe
director of the movie?
The neighbor's name or the director's name is Joe Bagos, I think. Did I get that correct? Yeah, Joe Bagos. Joe Bagos. If you happen to be watching this, I'm sorry that I didn't know it right offhand, but I did have it written down somewhere. Okay, so Kim, what happens when the neighbor comes out?
Well, and they set it up again earlier. I've got this neighbor. He's got this car. He always parks it here, yada, yada, yada. I'm so annoyed. So then when he comes out later and he's, oh my God, my car, you hit my car a lot. And just another nice little moment. Like you set it up and then it paid off later. But yeah, he comes out and I think he even I don't think he sees it coming, does he?
No,
they're trying
I don't think he does at all.
Trying to tell him, get out of the way. And he's like, what?
It reminded me of, have you ever seen The Big Lebowski? I assume you've seen that at some point.
At some point, one time, a long time ago, I
It
did.
reminded me of that scene where they start bashing in a car and it's the wrong car and the neighbor freaks out. Anyway, that's totally a tangent that has nothing to do with this at all. So anyway,
Right.
yeah, and I can't remember how the neighbor dies. I mean, does he get axed? I don't remember
It's
the whole
probably just another act scene.
that. And I will say, if there's a gripe that I have, and this is a really stupid gripe to have, I wish they would have switched up the weapon a little bit more with the robot. So it's, I mean, there's a lot of axing. He gets the axe from, I guess, like a fire safety box or whatever at
Yeah.
the toy store that he's at, and that's kind of the primary thing until he gets a shotgun from the police officer or the sheriff's officer who shows up. Right. So the sheriff's officer shows up, and Tori is trying to say, "There's a killer Santa that's not human. Do something, help me." And he's like, "What are you talking about? Calm down." Typical horror movie
Yeah.
police response kind of stuff. He's sitting in the car
Yes.
with her, and I think the robot drags him out of the car at that point, or he shoots the robot a couple of times and nothing happens.
Oh yeah, he does. He shoots him, and he's like, "Don't
Yeah,
worry, he's dead. He's dead. We're good. We're good." And there is this almost very moment of like, "Is this it?" And it can't be it, but like you get to settle for a second, and then yeah, I can't remember exactly what happens, but no, he's not dead. And then the police officer is, and then she's covered in blood,
right,
very
right.
Carrie-esque, and she takes off in the car.
This is the point, and we talked about this yesterday a little bit when we were chatting about the movie. But this is the point where I started to get some of the Terminator vibes. I mean, obviously,
Mm,
it gets much more concrete later in the movie.
yeah,
Like we're almost in like the final act here. But yeah, so she takes off. She's driving down the road, and then I guess the rest of the cavalry that was on the way, the rest of the police
yeah.
stop her.
The two other police officers in town.
Right, and of course, she's like you said, she's covered in blood. She's driving a stolen police car, so naturally they arrest her, which totally makes sense.
Yeah, yes, it does, but also I don't know. Like to me, I was like, really? Like you're that pig-headed that you're not going to listen to this woman who's screaming and hysterical? I don't know. I
Right,
get
and
it.
the windshield's busted out, all of that kind of stuff. So it's not overall a totally straightforward situation, right? Like you would
Yeah,
think that maybe there would be a slightly different response to that. But anyway, so then we transition to the sheriff's station, and so this is where the real Terminator vibes come in. Again, she's
yeah,
basically screaming from the rooftop, "You have to do something! There's a maniacal killer out there, and I don't know that it's human." They're sort of like, "Oh, you're crazy! What are you telling me? Santa Claus is on a rampage on Christmas
yeah,
Eve," kind of stuff. And then in the background, we see the ambulance from the apartment complex come hurtling toward the station, right?
yeah.
Like
I was like,
crash into
really?
a car. So what did you
Really?
think about that? Did you not like that
I
the way
did
they kind of
not like that. I guess again because I don't know much about this previously defense software killer robot, but I guess they were programmed to drive.
yeah.
I don't
Maybe
know.
they had to
I didn't know it
commandeer
was
an
that
enemy
advanced.
vehicle, Kim. Maybe if they were in battle, they had to,
I can believe it. I can definitely believe it. I guess I just to me that made it almost less scary. Like the
right.
more he became almost human, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, if you can do all these things, then you should be able to die. And then we know that that takes a long
Well,
time.
yeah, and I think at that point it starts to shift a little bit from a horror movie to an action movie. Like literally, I mean, he's crashing
Yeah,
into a car and it blows up. And I will say, for a movie with a meager budget, that was they handled the explosions and things well. I
yeah,
mean, it looked good. Like there was
yeah.
nothing
I
questionable
agree.
about any of
And I
that.
thought it took a space that was kind of confined. And again, as a writer, I'm always like, oh, how can I use spaces to create more suspense and more tension? And I think that they did that really well because then she is sort of trapped in this room and she can see what's outside. The windows have been smashed out. So could he come in through the windows? He's going to come in through the station. Like I thought that set it up really well.
So this, and again, this is where it goes full Terminator to me, which is not a bad thing necessarily. Like I'm kind of two minds on this. I thought as an homage to the first Terminator movie, it was kind of awesome. I like that it paralleled a lot of things, but at the same time, I'm like, did it plagiarize it? Kind of like, is there enough originality in the way that this concludes? But anyway, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of that scene in the Terminator where it goes into the police station to get Sarah Connor, and it's just like
Yeah.
literally taking out every police officer and like flipping over a desk and
Yeah.
whatever, trying to find her. So it's a similar situation where she's hiding under a desk, and it's just flipping over everything it can to try and get to
And
her.
of course,
Right,
it's the last one.
right.
It's never the first one they flip over. Like, oh, you were right here. Okay, cool.
And I forgot she doesn't she have a taser with her at that point? Was that
She has a shotgun that she is very stealthily trying to load so that he
does
doesn't
she?
hear her. She
Well,
might also have the taser too. She does get a taser.
I'm trying to remember where she got the taser because like it doesn't. He picks her up from under the desk,
Grabs it on something. Yeah.
and she shocks him. And of course, because he's a robot, he gets overloaded electrically and freaks out.
Yeah.
And, so at that point, I'm trying to remember if she felt like she had defeated the robot at that point. I mean, she goes out to the ambulance and she's kind of obviously in sort of shock over the whole situation. But if you've watched any Terminator movie or horror movie, you of course know that the killer is not dead at that point in any way, shape, or form, right? So it gets up and it gets onto the back of the ambulance as she's driving away, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes. And she's like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right. So it gets to the front of the car. The ambulance is about to kill her. And what does she do? She crashes into something and it goes flying through the windshield.
And she does it intentionally, which is a moment you see in a lot. There's a scene in The Faculty, I will say, that's how they defeat. So we'll try to defeat something. It's like, okay, I will almost sacrifice myself to try to defeat you because you're going through the windshield.
Yeah, so that, I mean, again, from an action movie perspective, I was totally fine with that. I thought that was okay. And I think she rolls a car over on it or hits a car to fall on it. I mean, she basically starts trying to break it, essentially, at that point. And it gets to a point where she legit thinks it's done. Like she's finished it.
I mean, he's pretty destroyed. Yeah, and they use the light. His light, like he powers down, and you're like, okay, she did it. There's no light anymore. He's dead.
Right. Again, like the Terminator, where you think, okay, he's dead, but he's not quite yet. But she ends up back in front of her record store. I mean, the whole thing kind of comes full circle, right? So she's just slowly making her way away from the crash scene into the store so she can, I guess, regroup and call for help or whatever. But that's when he comes back to life. And again, I like the practical effects here where you see kind of like, I don't know, fiber optic stuff lighting up.
Yeah, he's no longer Santa. Now he's like full blown, like I am clearly a robot.
Right. And he has 2 green lasers coming out of his eyes.
Yes.
What did you think about that? Did you?
Well, I guess I was like, they're not like lasers as in like they weren't destroying something. It was like
they were like, awesome.
I'm like, okay, they're just beams, I guess. They weren't lasers in the sense of like functional. They were more just like eye lasers. I don't know. It was cool, but I didn't know except to then scan and we just found her hiding, so now we know where she is.
If nothing else, I feel like it was just sort of a visual for the audience to see where it's looking, right? And it just looks cool.
Yes.
I mean, it's just like a cool effect to have.
And it's very clearly a robot, and robots have laser eyes.
And I will say, when the robot was walking around half destroyed with all of its electronics hanging out, I thought the effect was good. Like I thought, again, because it's practical, it didn't look overly cheesy to me. It looked good, but
it looked like a robot who's been run over.
And I know at this point we were kind of messaging each other because I had finished watching it first and you watched it, and it was like, oh my gosh, is this robot ever going to die? Right?
Yes. Because you get maybe 3 or 4. Maybe just 3. You get like at least maybe 3 times where the audience is allowed to think like, okay, is this it? No, it's not it. But then like we get to point like 4 and 0.5 and 0.6, and you're like, she has beaten this thing, electrocuted this thing, she's stabbed this like. At one point, I actually really started to wonder, does the robot win?
Which would have been kind of awesome, actually.
I wouldn't have hated it because I think there was this sort of commentary. Like when we talk about the chemistry building between these characters, most of their dialogue is about records. And like her whole argument is, no, they've ruined it after they've cut their hair. Like she seems to be this purist when it comes to technology. And so here she is fighting this advanced form of technology. However, I felt like it was a little hypocritical then during their whole conversation about horror movies, where she never likes the original. She only likes the obscure sequel. And I'm like, now I feel like you're just pandering. Now I feel like you are a horror fan. Sorry, writer, director, Joe Bagos, that just wanted to throw out all of your opinions about horror movies. Now she likes Child's Play 3. I also like Child's Play 3. Yeah. So I don't have an issue with that. But it felt like it didn't totally mesh with this purist in her. But I feel like the big message. It's like technology versus technology, old versus new. Who's going to win?
Yeah, and was Child's Play 3 the one where he's at the ROTC school or like the military? Yeah. I mean, honestly, I kind of like all of the Child's Play movies. There's one that I didn't like. There's one where he's got like a kid or something.
I did not see that one. That's the only one I haven't seen.
And that was the worst of the lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, again, everything that's happening here is very Terminator-esque. And I thought there was some irony in that, but you just brought it up, and I'm glad you did, because I was going to talk about this, where they're talking about horror movies, and it's really steeped in pop culture, a lot of the commentary, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Terminator is one of the most popular movies ever. I thought it would have been kind of coolly self-aware if they had at least referenced that at some point, but I don't know if that would have been a bad idea or not.
I feel like it would have been too aware, and then I think in those final scenes, people would have been like, "Oh, okay," I felt like it would have been too on the nose to mention something like Terminator.
Yeah. So, okay, so the robot's been shocked and beaten down 3, 4, 5 times at this point.
Yeah.
And I think it might have been ripped in half, or there was something going on with it where it was just barely able to function and move around. But
she does something at one point, and it's pretty destroyed.
But she managed, or the robot manages to cut off her fingers, right? So it's got the axe.
Yeah,
that was kind of surprising to me.
Yes, I was pleasantly surprised. And that's when I'm like, oh my gosh, she might not make it out. And I have a thing about digits. I do not like things with fingers and toes, because that's one of my worst fears.
Next time I see you, remind me to tell you a super gross story about a toe. Next time I see you, not my toe, somebody else's toe. You're gonna love it. It's awesome.
Thank you. But to me, that was one of the most horrifying moments of that movie, quite honestly. I would probably rather be axed in the back than have 3 of my fingers chopped off. That I do, because I'm like, nope. All I can think of, oh my God, how is she going to live her life? What is that going to look like for her?
Well, and then also, not only that, she breaks her ankle, right? Her bone is sticking out. She falls off a counter or something like that and breaks her ankle. And so I think ultimately, if I'm remembering how it all kind of unfolds, she ends up destroying the robot by just electrocuting it again. She pulls some wires out of the wall.
A little bit like a Deep Blue Sea moment where that woman grabs the electric cord from behind her and then shocks the shark. She grabs the electric from behind her and then shocks the Santa from above. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, just like a shark.
Speaking of unexpected deaths, Sam Jackson in Deep Blue Sea, the way he gets taken out in that movie.
That's amazing.
That was amazing. Yes. That was one of my favorite movie moments ever.
That will shock you. You don't expect it at all. This great monologue. He's getting the amped up speech, and then bam, he's done. And everyone's like, what just happened?
Totally amazing. So that's pretty much it for the movie, right? I don't remember if there's anything after. There's nothing that stands out for me after that point of okay, the robot's finally dead. Of course, she's injured, but I don't think there's anything else of note after that.
No, it did end. I'll say abruptly. I was okay with it to end because we just spent the last 20 minutes what are we doing here? Are we done yet? But then I almost expected a 1 year later. I don't know. I thought there was going to be something at the end, and there wasn't, and that's fine.
Well, and I feel my opinion, I feel like this movie is good enough from a low budget horror movie perspective to have been oh, here's another department store halfway across the country where the killer Santa comes to life, and now we're setting up Christmas Bloody Christmas, the sequel, whatever. I thought that would have been kind of cool.
I guess when the robot wasn't dying, I thought, are we going in that direction? Where she's going to get away, but then the robot comes back and there is going to be some sort of sequel. And so I think there was another opportunity there to, cut to another store or something, because I am curious, and that maybe would explain why it's not just, maybe all of them are going to get violent and there didn't need to be a trigger, but they never explained that.
Yeah. So, okay, so that's the end of the movie, and I don't usually do a number rating for movies. I just I liked it, I didn't like it, somewhere in the middle. So I would say that for the most part, I thought this was an enjoyable low-budget horror movie. And I have kind of a soft spot for low-budget horror movies. I think I just like them. I like when people kind of, make the best of what they have as far as resources go. And I think the acting here is good. I think, the story's thin, but it doesn't need to be anything more than that. It's totally fine. I do think a little more gore would have been welcome, at least for me. But overall, I liked it. I don't. What's your final take on Christmas Bloody Christmas?
I don't think I'll ever watch it again. But I mean, unless I had a group of people, you know what I mean? Hey guys, you never saw it? Well, let's all get kind of drunk and watch this movie together, because that seems very fitting for the tone of the movie.
Totally.
But or if I know someone who really doesn't like gore, I might be well, let's watch this movie because I like to see them squirm. But I would never watch it again on my own, I did like it though.
Yeah.
As far as like what you would expect from this kind of movie, I thought the acting felt very natural. The story, made sense for what it was. I wish the gore was a little more realistic. That took me out of it. But overall, I liked it. I would recommend it for someone who likes horror movies and especially Christmas horror movies. Like, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's totally worth like an hour and a half of your streaming time. Like, but beyond that, like, yeah, maybe not revisiting, but it's an enjoyable little thing for Christmas horror fans, I think. So
yeah, especially because there's not that much anymore. So
yeah, I do want to see Violent Night, and also I would recommend Fat Man. I don't know, have you ever heard of Fat Man or seen Fat Man? It's Mel Gibson as Santa Claus, and this kid gets a lump of coal in his stocking, this wealthy kid, and sends assassins up to the North Pole to kill Santa, and Santa takes them all out, and it's kind of awesome. But anyway, it's completely ridiculous and absurd. But I that's it for Christmas Bloody Christmas. I think we both enjoyed it and would recommend it. Anything else, Kim, that you want to add?
I mean, it is not something I would have young people watch.
We didn't even talk about the profanity, right? I mean, that's like a whole different.
Yeah. Which, I mean, personally, I don't have an issue with. Like, that's how I talk about.
I don't. And I know you brought this up yesterday. So we were looking at IMDb and the trivia, and I've got this pulled up. So this film features 487 uses of profanity with an average of 5.6 per minute. I don't know if that's a record, but like, a heads up.
Well, it adds to the naturalism. Like, I believed it. Like,
yeah.
It made it all sound very natural among the characters. I guess I just didn't know there was going to be so much drinking, drugs, and sex. I didn't know that was going to be so much part of the story. So I'm glad that I didn't have anybody younger around to watch it.
Yeah. I definitely would not watch this within earshot or eyesight of kids for sure.
Yeah.
But I think all of that, I think what they were doing was just leaning into that grindhouse thing a little bit more. But like, it was fine. It totally contributed to the atmosphere.
Yes.
So, well, we'll have to think about the next movie, Kim. I don't know what our next movie is going to be. Is there a scary Easter movie on the horizon? Hopefully we'll see a movie before then. I don't know, but
it was once my goal to write a horror movie for every holiday.
Okay.
So I don't know what else is out there.
I'm about done, bud. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. My son he had to let me know that Erica had just made some late breakfast for everybody. So anyway,
breakfast at 11. I'm about ready to have lunch, but
I know. I'm the same way. Anyway, I'm gonna get some eggs. I think it was fun, Kim. We'll do another movie review soon.
Yes.
For everybody who's watching, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for your viewership, and we will be back soon.